Mhm. Excellent. And I'm going to read these because I took pictures, but I feel bad that I didn't get to them. Metazone 101, a $50 super chat, said, Robert, are you worried that the Portland shooting of the Patriot Prayer person may be Archduke Franz Ferdinand moment, as it looks like an assassination?
There's two things with that. One is this is still mostly on the margins. So the whole bulk of America has no interest in this whatsoever, as part one. So when things like Ferdinand exploded, when things like what happened in the Soviet Revolution happened in 1917, there were a lot of timbers ready to be lit aflame. And that's not quite, I don't think that's really true here in the States. And in terms of, they don't have a revolutionary insurrectionary movement behind a small group of people. You can only get so many people out so continuously in certain cities. You don't see them coming down to rural Tennessee and trying to do something. So it gives you a little bit of a cue. And the other aspect of that is, I think it is time for the president likely to invoke the Insurrection Act. I think Trump realized early on that if he did anything, this is what Antifa wanted and this is what the media wanted. They were going to blame him. If anybody has any doubt about this, look at him just going in briefly, authorizing the Homeland Security to take action in Portland. And he was attacked for night after night by the mainstream media, who lied about the existence of the riots and said, "Oh my God, he's gassing like mothers. He's either beating up old SEALs. Not physical SEAL, people that were SEALs in the Navy." So that's how the media portrayed it every night. You wouldn't even know. The reason why Democrats have locked themselves into this position is they've been lying to themselves and the world for the last 3 months about the riots. They've been lying about Antifa now for 5 years. People like Mike Cernovich have been documenting this for a long time. I was at the Deplore Ball. I had a friend of mine who was there. She's small. Tiny little person. In terms of physically, she was in a position where they were throwing batteries at her. They didn't do hardly anything about it. Some of the people that were prosecuted during that weekend ended up walking, that were involved in the inauguration violence, because the DC jury is so political. They did jury nullification. So this has been a problem, and the best documentary person on this is Tim Pool. He's been documenting these Antifa going back to 2015, because he came out of the Occupy movement. Before that, I think he's a self-described hacker. So Tim Pool is pretty objective. Usually came from the left, did not support Trump for most of the time period. He is now, because he's been so agitated at what he's been witnessing on the Democratic Party side and the media side by covering up for what took place related to Antifa and how dangerous they are. And now he thinks that we could be on the verge of civil war, that people are going to start being hunted who are on the politically wrong side of the aisle. Scott Adams warned was a risk. And it appears to have happened to the man in Portland. He appeared to have been literally hunted effectively and shot. There is no evidence of self-defense in that case. Yeah, watch the media claim that was self-defense, while what they accused Rittenhouse of is what was happening by Antifa in Portland in the shooting of that individual. And so by all evidence we know to date. Of course, evidence can change, and we'll revise our opinions if it does. So it's what needs to happen is the Insurrection Act needs to be invoked. The president, because at this point I think people are tired of it, and when people are feeling forced to defend themselves, when 17-year-old kids are the last remedy for an old guy being able to defend his little mechanic shop, that's a problem, and it's time for Trump to step in. And don't worry about the political hits at this point. The country now is far enough along to know he needs to take action.
What would the Insurrection Act allow President Trump to do, or what would it allow it to happen?
So the Insurrection Act was passed in 1808. It was a follow-up of one that was passed in 1792. And originally these laws were designed to deal with the militia. So our constitutional system was designed to never have a national standing army, because the belief was a national standing army was the source of all corruption and oppression of people's rights and liberties. Unfortunately, that didn't hold for very long, but it held for the first half century or so. So originally it was designed to the right of the president to call up the militia. And the reason why the militia was about the democratization of the use of force. So it's the same way that a jury system is a check on civil and criminal cases, that somebody in your community, in your neighborhood, that's why our venue and jury trials rights work together. It's that you're going to be judged by, like the Magna Carta was all about the knights complaining about being judged by people who did not know the knights. Hence, that's where the jury of your peers language comes from. Now, we don't have peers, but what we mean by it is the venue, the vicinage component of the Constitution. Your neighbors, your community is the one that decides and judges whether you did something right or wrong. It's the democratization of the use of force by the executive branch against an individual, either for property reallocation in the case of civil cases or criminal punishment in the case of criminal cases. The militia was also intended to be the sort of the jury version of that. That in essence, we didn't have to worry about a national army getting corrupted or misusing and abusing its power, because the power of that army would come from the militia itself, which was ordinary people in their ordinary communities who were not lifelong military members, who would let the local community be a check on the misuse and abuse of power. If we still had that method of armed force, a lot of our wars likely never happened, because the militias likely don't join up for a lot of the bogus wars and conflicts that have occurred over the past century. So, but that sort of went by the wayside by the 1860s. So they modified the Insurrection Act over time to allow the person to call in the president to call in the army, what they called the land and water forces of the U.S. government, to call in any of those government, as well as the militia. They don't do the militia anymore, or as well as the National Guard ultimately was added to that in a multiple set of circumstances. One of those set of circumstances, the reason why you see Trump saying he wants people to ask for it, mostly he's doing that for political purposes. But legally, if the governor asks for it under the Insurrection Act, he can automatically send him in. He doesn't need any other factual predicate. If they don't ask for it, then he can still send him in anytime there's the local police is incapable for any reason of protecting the constitutional rights preserved under the U.S. Constitution of U.S. citizens. And the procedural protocol for that is he gives a dispersal order, says this community you must disperse or I'm sending them in, and he can send in anyone. He can send in, I prefer the National Guard. Sending in military, I think, sets a bad precedent, but we have done it. And to give examples, the Insurrection Act was used by Andrew Jackson, used by multiple times. The person that used it the most originally was Ulysses S. Grant to protect civil liberties in the South after the Civil War. Then it was used mostly to put down labor strikes, unfortunately. But up until the 1920s, 1930s, FDR used it for the first time in a riot context, or a non-labor dispute-related riot context, the Detroit 1943 race riots, where he sent in 6,000 troops. It may have been National Guard. Then it was used aggressively by both Eisenhower and Kennedy to enforce civil rights laws. Both in the Little Rock integration and the school integrations in Birmingham and University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, and so forth. Then it was used aggressively by Lyndon Baines Johnson to put down riots in 1967 and 1968. He used it 3 different times in 3 different cities within 3 months in 1968. It then started not being used as much and as often. We also haven't experienced anything like what we're seeing right now in the country. We really have never experienced it, the scale, the scope, and the length of time we're seeing right now. It's unprecedented, unparalleled in American history. But all he has to do is he has to issue make a factual finding. Federal constitutional rights are being violated, number one. Number two, the local authorities are either refusing or failing to be able to protect these constitutional rights. And so hence 3, I'm invoking the Insurrection Act. I'm ordering a dispersal of Portland or Kenosha. The governor folded and called and let the president bring in the National Guard after people died. It's sad that it had to go that route, but that was what ultimately did. But in all these other places, Portland being the paramount one currently, but anywhere else where it's still occurring, to some degree it's happening in Seattle. It sporadically happens all across the country. It happens in Raleigh. It happens in unbelievable places that surprise people. But I would start with Portland if I was the president, especially after this death. I would say it's clear you're not willing to protect people. You're either unwilling or unable. It looks to me like you're unwilling. So I order a dispersal order of Antifa in Portland. And if you don't obey it within 2 days, I'm sending in the army and everyone else. And let the federal judge issue his order. At this point, the federal judge has shown, the federal judge who we talked about, the Obama judge in Portland issuing some crazy orders restricting federal law enforcement of his own federal courthouse. He was overturned this week by the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit said that it was highly unlikely that decision had any lawful basis at all. And so that's how it go. That person's right about the National Guard. That super chat, they're correct.
Yeah, I missed the one.
And that's why I tend to mix and match them. I prefer National Guard just for the visual imagery. Even though most of them are military personnel themselves, and are experienced under it, just because Kurt Schlichter, for example, has been part of this himself, involving what happened in LA in 1992, and he'll give you a good description of the problems with bringing in actual military as opposed to the National Guard, which is trained and used to do it. It's done it multiple times over the last 100 years, so on and so forth. If Trump invokes the act, Trump is in charge. So the Insurrection Act empowers the president, and it's federal law enforcement, federal military going in, and they run the show. And the reality is they can clean it up and clean it out within days. Historically, when you do a massive show of force, Antifa will vanish or disappear. They'll try to create some additional problems, but when you're attacking U.S. National Guard, it's not going to look good for you. And I think the president, it's starting to get to the point politically where he has no choice. Just talking on Twitter is not enough. I understand why he's been hesitant. I've been glad that he's been hesitant, because I don't like using federal National Guard or federal military on our city streets ever, if we can avoid it. But the dynamic has changed. When people are dying back to back between Kenosha and Portland, and in Kenosha because no one is coming to their defense, in Portland because they're hunting people, it's time to fix things. So it's time to take action. He's the president for a reason.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Someone, and Tom High says, Viva Phi friend here. I was wondering if you consider doing more shows, since one episode a week doesn't seem to be enough. I'm lucky. We haven't gotten interrupted yet tonight, Robert. And I think that the time is ticking. So that's an amazing idea. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And some people are saying, enough is enough now. Some people hope he doesn't do it. Others say it's murder in the streets at this point.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And then it becomes a tit for tat. Like I was thinking, I have no experience with the the war in Ireland, but I can see that this is exactly how it builds up. It's like, you killed one of mine, now I'm going to kill one of yours, and then it just spirals out of control, and nobody steps up to speak calmer and to pacify things and to bring in law enforcement. I mean,
and especially when they're weaponizing anybody who tries to defend themselves. We'll talk in another episode about the Michael Strickland case, but that's where a lot of this started, was in Michael Strickland. I'm going to be taking that up to the U.S. Supreme Court, because the Oregon Supreme Court refused to take action, unfortunately. People can look up Laughing at Libs and find out his history, both on YouTube and on Twitter, and find out the whole history of the case. That was the beginning of weaponizing prosecutions to prevent people from defending themselves. And there he didn't even use the gun. He just brandished it and put it away. And so now that we have a combination of continuous violence on the streets that Democrats will not clean up or fix, and we're having bodies drop in the streets, and we're having political weaponization for anybody who tries to defend themselves, when you combine those three, the president has to take action. Why should the Rittenhouses of the world risk their lives and now risk their freedom for the rest of their lives to do what the president, for what the government should be doing directly? And that means the president needs to be the one to step in the gap, not force the Rittenhouses of the world to be the sole line of defense.
I think we need to do one episode or one show strictly on Strickland, because
that's a good idea.
I mean, maybe we do it at some point during the week if we can get around to it, and if you have the time, because there is too much, and especially like with the news and the law developing the way it's developing, we didn't even get through half of the subjects we were supposed to. Let me see here. Kidney Stone says, I love these streams, getting harder and harder to find the truth with the tech giant censorship. Keep it up, Fry and Barnes, as long as we can, for sure. It's obvious that an organized force is behind the domestic insurgency. Best guess who is behind it.
Yeah, so there's different people. I mean, you just look at who's funding BLM, so that will be the cue. But really, it's a combination. So in other words, BLM by itself couldn't create this, even with some of the financing they're getting, even with the the Antifa types have been around, and they've been around aggressively in the last 5 years. But again, none of this happens without a political permission slip. So the key has been prosecutors not prosecuting them, police not policing them, the press ignoring them and pretending they don't exist. There was even one of my favorite guitarists who was in The Sopranos was talking about how he's talking to a buddy, he's the FBI, and this Antifa, that's just a right-wing fantasy. It's like, what world are you people living in? You cannot gaslight people for forever. And you keep gaslighting people this way, they're never going to trust you ever again. The rise of the fall of the press isn't because someone listens to Rush Limbaugh or listens to Alex Jones and decides, now I don't like the press. They go listen to Rush Limbaugh and Alex Jones because they have learned the press lies so repeatedly to them. And the weaponization by the prosecutors of these cases for politically motivated purposes, both in the two-tiered system of justice in D.C. and the selective I mean, here in Kenosha, they go after the kid when all the evidence, even from the New York Times, says he defended himself, while the other guy, one of the people he shot, admits on record that his intention was to kill him, and he still hasn't been arrested, and he has a long criminal rap sheet. I mean, how is this?
That's what I was wondering. If that guy does not get indicted ASAP, identity known, admission through a third party, but whatever, but goes to a peaceful rider, goes with a concealed weapon, and there's video evidence. If he doesn't get arrested, there's a problem. And it's a bigger problem than not being able to identify him, because I guarantee you the folks on 4chan could probably find his home address in 30 seconds flat. But if that doesn't happen, people are going to start putting two and two. They've already started.
Exactly.
They're going to start getting enraged.
When I tell my leftist friends, in Civil War history, the left does almost never won. So people cite the Russian Revolution. The military was on the side of the left in a lot of that context. A lot of sailors and other people were on the side of the communist. That is not true here in the United States. So if there was ever an actual civil war, I would not want to be on the left side of that equation. They misgauge the scope and scale of their influence and power. Their real power is with the press and with the prosecutors' offices and the politicians who are weaponizing their power for politicized purposes. And that's why I think the president has to take action. Don't force Rittenhouse into the position he was in. Don't let people die on the streets that were part of his own Trump caravan simply because they were part of his Trump caravan in Portland. Mm-hmm. I understand he's got the nitwits like Kushner and other people telling him other things. I respect the fact that he acted with restraint, but enough is enough. Now action is required.
Amazing. Okay, now that is a good point to go to I'm going to just read through these because I don't want to miss them. I feel bad if I do. MetaZone, I got. American Sun says, and $100 super chat. Thank you very much. How is it constitutional that mail-in ballots can be counted for up to 17 days after election day is over, like in California? If I were to show up at the poll on November 4th, too bad. It's closed. No vote for me. And Viva, where can I buy your new merch? Just so everybody knows, this doesn't just say politics. Politics ruins everything. I looked for a while like it just says politics, which is the antithesis of the shirt. In the links in all of my videos, you can find it. Thank you very much, American Sun. And I'm sorry I didn't get to that question earlier. Then we got Sarn XERO says, that is interesting that the coroner report on Rosenbaum does state one of the shots entered his back. Someone else shot at Kyle. So apparently one of the victims had a bullet enter through the back, which would not be consistent with the story being told. We got Sicily72 says, great stream. Thank you both. Madame Von Kook says, Rosenbaum had a bullet that entered in his back besides the headshot. According to the coroner in the videos, 23 shots are counted. Kyle only shot 7 rounds. Lucas Kaiser says, consider this as part of the retainer for fee for Kyle. Represent to Mr. Barnes. Love you, Viva. Thank you very much. Okay, and then I think we got William Coddington says, Viva Fry and Barnes Law, the best thing to come to Sunday evenings. Thank you very much. Sarroise says, both your thoughts on the law requiring out-of-state felons to register 24 hours before entering my state to take part in a protest, allow all to protest, but help LEOs, law enforcement officers, prepare for expected felon numbers. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's limitations on when one state can use another state's felony convictions for restricting rights of that citizen within the state. There's implications under the right to travel under the Immunities and Privileges Clause of the U.S. Constitution. But if they're on outstanding probation, then usually those restrictions or restraints are legitimate and legal. And then as to mail-in balloting, election day is supposed to only happen one day of the year, but in Nevada, they're allowing ballots to be counted for days and up to weeks afterwards. I believe that's constitutionally and statutorily problematic, and there's lawsuits litigating it. But, for example, I told people in Nevada, I said, here's the hard part. Nevada, there's not a federal judge. There's very few federal judges on the bench here in Nevada that were not appointed without the assent of Harry Reid. So I don't know how willing they're going to be to buck the Democratic political establishment here in Nevada on cases that don't have clear past precedent. Even if the logic appears and the law appears clear to me, it's not necessarily always so to everyone else.
Breaking. I'm going to see if this is news that I haven't yet read. SWAT responds as pro-Trump caravan on Ventura Boulevard in Woodland Hills, where I have family, hit by gunfire.
That's why they put him in a position where he has no choice but to act. The president's going to have to get involved. The mayors have absconded from their duties and obligations. They've been an embarrassment and a joke, and the press has been complicit in it by lying to the world and to the politicians about their ability to suppress knowledge of the riots.
And that was the last super chat that I was trying to click on before I swiped myself out of the stream again and lost all the previous super chats. It was a $20 super chat that said the media is all behind this with the lying and the covering up.
They're definitely materially responsible. This doesn't happen if they're honest.
Yeah, and it's an amazing thing because I don't even blame the people for not being aware of this. I was in company of educated people all last week having discussions, and some of them don't even know the basics of Michael Flynn. They don't know the name of the McCloskeys. All they know of the incident: a couple of crazy Missouri couples brandishing guns at people protesting.
Peaceful protesters, sweet kids.
They don't know the context. They don't
crazy white people just ran out showing guns to them.
No, and they don't know about the dismantling of the pistol. They know none of these details. And I feel sort of like weird that I know all these details about these current events, but it's just the world in which I'm immersing myself now. But you realize the media has the power to misinform, to keep ignorant, to distract, and to utterly lie to, and then let me rephrase, to misinform, but then correct by erratum that nobody sees 5 days later on in the small print on page 5. It's a world to be alive in, and it's a very frustrating one at that, because it's not a question of being smarter than everybody else, and there's no but. It's just when you are familiar with facts that nobody else knows, you begin to question your own sanity. It's like, am I the one who's crazy, or is everyone around me just grossly ill-informed? And it makes for a fun discussion with people where you end up looking a little.
And the worst part of this is actual civil rights will be undermined in America. There, as I saw in Milwaukee, juries, because they've been lied to by the press, they assume any civil rights case they're likely being lied to. So even when they have video evidence in front of them, they no longer believe it. And so LeBron James needs to start writing apologies to the victims of civil rights abuses whose cases he helped gut by lying about things about other cases. And so that's my view of a lot of these guys. Same with Doc Rivers. He can write the same apology. These people claiming to support civil rights, one, I've almost never seen them on the front lines of any civil rights case ever. In their own hometowns where they could actually make a real difference. So I think they're phonies, fakes, and frauds. And secondly, they're hurting civil rights for real people, for real progress. And it's outrageous.
All right. And on that note, that is a perfect time to end this live stream. We are going to have, at the very least, carryover issues to next week. We'll do one separate show on Strickland so we can really delve into it and you can inform the world. Robert, first of all, let's thank everybody. This was over 14,000 people watching live, which is, hands down, astounding. It's 10,000 more people. No, 8,000 more than ever before. Amazing. And Robert, you are, I saw people were saying you have a 999 IQ. I don't know what your IQ is. It's just amazing. Someone said you literally had every event of the Insurrection Act being invoked in United States history. So I can read fast, but I don't have the knowledge you have. And it's amazing. And thank you for giving it to us. And thank everybody for tuning in. I think I just see 2 more super chats. So I'll bring them up while we're here. Robert's permissive environment enabling psychopaths, antisocial behavior is on the money. Silence of the Democrats on violence, encouragement by AOC and others, and local police stand downs, all providing strong signals. I'll get to the other one here. Keep up the good work, Pink Sniper. Thank you very much. Kamala Harris on Stephen Colbert saying, the protests are going to continue to Election Day and past, and then at the same time, the next day we must unify and get everyone to calm down and not have violence in the streets. It is what it is, and it's not a partisan observation. It's not a partisan observation. It's just you cannot say certain things one day and then come out with a press release the next day. And if anybody has not read Joe Biden's full statement, I posted a screenshot of the page 2 of his written statement. Go read it. It'll blow your mind.
And you could see the previews for this all the way back to 2016. This has been deliberate and intentional by the political class who has the knowledge of the history to know that what they did with Antifa, what they did, I mean, the way they recast Charlottesville, they made it only bad alt-right racist, tried to hide what Antifa did. Chris Cuomo compared Antifa to the people who ended World War II on behalf of America and did the beaches at Normandy. So they deliberately elevated these scum and these criminals, and they did so to the great danger and the great risk of ordinary, everyday American freedoms and liberties. And that's where we're at today. And basically, we can add a third truth to the two eternal truths. Eternal truth number one, Sally Yates is corrupt. Eternal truth number two, Epstein didn't kill himself. And now eternal truth number three, Rittenhouse is innocent.
That is, people will not like the fact that he ultimately will probably be found innocent, and he should never have been in that position in the first place. This is what happens. It is a series of events, and it was predictable from the beginning. All right, gentlemen, on that note, everybody, have a good evening. The weekend is almost over, but enjoy the last 2.5 hours of it, depending on your time zone. Robert, infinite thank you as always. SDNY, thank you for informing a great many people of our podcast live stream. This will be out on podcast if it's not tomorrow, because I'm going to be in court by Tuesday, and then the highlights and on YouTube. So that's it. You can rewatch it. All of Barnes' links are going to be in there, as well as mine. And everyone, tune in. You'll get notified for the next live stream. Peace out, everybody.